an hour and a half, and then on Sunday for a half hour, and then obviously showing banquet, we're actually like kids there, and then there is two other tracks, one Thursday night or one Friday morning. One Thursday night, one Friday morning. So it's another hour just being around by the rally. You think it's good, whatever. Honestly, good. Yeah, Shlomo office. Deciding which tracks you want to do. Yeah. I don't want to put in these other guys track. Here. Yeah, one counselor, would be three counselors for that track, one group. And then also Australia track also has some shop. Yes, maybe not. We have. Friday. Whatever.
Okay.
You're gonna, you're gonna be the host. There we go. Yeah.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Parsha class for this week, Parsha Chayie Sarah. And today I'm broadcasting from elsewhere. We had a family event today, and so I am in a bit of a different location than usual. So I hope you'll mind some of the background noise. And
right now, I'll tell you,
the camera's a bit off, but thank you for joining us nonetheless. Hope the message will come through. Want to express my thanks to the Shluchim office here in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, that graciously provided a location for us to be able to they provide a home away from home for around the world. They can have some kind of office space, and so many people from all over are here, and they're sharing the space together. So it's also upcoming close to the annual national conference of Chabad Shluchim, and even though that's going to be a virtual event this year, nonetheless, this place is bustling with all kinds of people who are working on various arrangements and preparations for the big event, which will bring together thousands and thousands of Chabad rabbis. So let me just turn this around, and there we go. Yeah, a little better. So I want to direct your attention to a verse in this week's Torah reading. This is really annoying. That's better. A verse in this week's Torah reading that describes our ancestor Yitzchak as he goes out to the field in the evening to pray. The Torah says, "Vayetze Yitzchak lasuach basar." Yitzchak went out to speak in the field, and the rabbis interpret the speaking is prayer. And it's been mentioned to me a couple of times that Yitzchak, when you read about the Yitzchak in the Torah, the descriptions of him as a person are few and far between. There's not really much known about him. Most of the episodes in Yitzchak's life are with Yitzchak as a passive part. Last week's Torah reading, we read about the binding of Isaac, in which he says nary two words. The truth is, and even in this week's Torah reading describes his approach to the occasion of him marrying, and here too, it's others who are doing everything on his behalf. The only real episodes that we have of Yitzchak taking any kind of initiative is this episode in which he goes out to the field to pray. Later on in the Torah reading that describes Yitzchak's occupation with digging wells rather. So I want to focus on just one nuance in this text that may give insight into a spiritual message that we can derive from this. And that is, Yitzchak chooses the moment of evening as the sun sets to engage in prayer. Metaphorically speaking, going to pray in the evening is a natural instinct for many people. But the pending darkness, feeling and uncertainty, certainly in ancient times, the nighttime is a time of danger, and both because of animals that come out at night, as well as simply you couldn't see at all. Visibility is limited. And I see this metaphor for us: darkness, anxiety, insecurity. And so our instinct to pray at time is quite natural. That we turn to God who is the master of all things in our time of weakness and insecurity. However, the word used for Yitzchak's prayer is not one of supplication, in which he turns to God, beseeching that God protect him in the dark. It's simply he speaks with God. He has God. As a matter of fact, the word lasuach, to speak, is used in the Mishnah as a reference to the way a man speaks. A man and woman converse. The Mishnah there talks about telling scholars that they should diminish conversing. Essentially, in our modern times, to be mindful of the proper boundaries between men and women, of modesty and propriety, and he says quite clearly that through unbridled and undisciplined conversation, that can lead a person to inappropriate behavior. As this teaching may be, it's certainly relevant and appropriate to be considered. But my point about it is really to say that the word sicha refers to a conversation that's friendly and that's open, lends itself to that kind of friendship and itself to the breaking down of boundaries. And so then therefore I take this to mean that when Yitzchak went out to pray, his prayer was such that he conversed with God in an open and boundary breaking, connecting way. We think of prayer sometimes as asking for God, asking of God, and but the truth is that's a very low level of prayer. A more advanced way of prayer is where a person sees the time of prayer as simply a time to spend, an opportunity to spend time with God, to spend time with their soul, time in the sacred, and not necessarily to converse with the sacred, not necessarily for any end or means, not to achieve any aim or objective, but simply to be in the presence of the divine and to communicate, to speak for the sake of speaking. In a relationship between a husband and wife, one of the best advice that I got early in my married life was that, you have to set time to us time for a couple. You have to go on regular dates, etc. But that during the dates, you really have to avoid speaking about the kids, and you have to avoid speaking about logistics, and just talk about things that come to mind. Talk for the sake of talking, and really, that's what a relationship is. The highest level of a relationship is not relate to each other in order to accomplish something, where you're not just a team, but that you actually enjoy each other's company for its own sake. And so this then is Yitzchak speaking to God and enjoying his company, presence of the sacred. And so now going next, that Yitzchak is doing this in the darkness. At the time of anxiety, in the time of darkness, this is his approach to turn to God and to be in the presence, just to enjoy God for his own sake, which is kind of counterintuitive. And I saw a beautiful teaching today in the writings of the Admor Hazakin, the first Rebbe of Chabad, in his book Torah Or. He points out a fascinating thing. He says, when we look at Jewish teachings, you can see a progression throughout Jewish halachic teaching, where the general principles of Torah are taught, and then they're broken down and analyzed and manifest into legal minutia, into the details of what the practice should be. For example, if you're going to teach about the mitzvah of Sukkah, which is the harvest festival and the hut that we build on the occasion of the holiday of Sukkot, if you teach that in general terms, it sounds beautiful. You have the beautiful idea of the huts evoking the journey of our ancestors from the land of Egypt, and so we live in these temporary huts. We also have the idea of the sukkah representing the harvest and kind of being in the celebratory experience of our ancestors as they gathered from the land of Israel. We can also think about the general ideas of sukkah as they living in a temporary dwelling and acknowledging our need to rely kind of in a broad stroke. And it sounds beautiful and it sounds inspiring. And then if a person were to go into the specifics and then open up the Code of Jewish Law and read about what the specific steps that one has to take in order to build a reflects Jewish tradition, we come up with all kinds of legal minutia and details that confound the intellect. Specific details about exactly the size it has to be and the way in which one engages with it. And here is where people often become disillusioned and bored, and they feel disconnected. And certainly it's very easy about Jewish practice in the broad strokes and to kind of gloss over specific details and to kind of talk about the inspirational messages there. But after all, the details that come on are really what characterizes Jewish life. Jewish life is not one that's lived in broad strokes. Certainly traditional observant Jewish life obsesses to the nth degree on these very specific. And so the Baal Tanya says something fascinating. He says, if you think about it, the human experience, what is our ability to grasp, is meaning our inspired experience is by definition a human experience, whereas the higher level is where we begin to connect more and experience more of God's presence and less of our. He says that will always be characterized by some darkness, by some limited ability to understand. And the further one goes into experiencing the presence of the divine, the further one goes away from experiencing human inspiration. And so he says our work is to understand that really the purpose of everything, the purpose of God's creation and of the entire process of human development is more realized in the of wonderment, confusion, even disillusion than it is in certainty, clarity, and inspiration. And so Yitzchak, he says, Lasuach basara, to speak and experience the presence of the divine, it was particularly lifnos arav, particularly at evening. And he says there's another nuance in the word lasuach, to speak, to humble oneself, to lower oneself. Lishchot in Hebrew means, because when a person swims, they go down into the water and they prostrate. And so he says when a person here, Yitzchak, when he was going to speak with God, converse with God, he was also prostrated. He was diminished. He was lacking a sense of self. And that lack of will also be one of darkness, of not knowing, of even frustration. Lifnos Arav, and in so doing, he cleans away the darkness, the evening. That is, the beauty of this approach is that the darkness is no longer dark. We now realize that actually the truth is one that's experienced in the presence of the darkness. That we begin to value that space of unknowing and realize that there is sublime and transcendent truth in that place. And so today, as we live in this space of unknowing, and today when we use this space of unknowing, and we live in this world in which there's so much uncertainty, both on social and political sphere, and as well in our spiritual life. So many people are really confused and feel uninspired and feel that they're experiencing more darkness than light. The words of Yitzchak come as an inspiration to say that the more unknowing there is, the closer we, and the more dark, the more of an advanced, elevated experience we're having. And so, answers and questions, but perhaps here reminded that the explanation only goes so far, and the real answer, the real end of the journey, will be in the question, not in the answer. In living in that secret, living in of unresolved, the unresolved experience is the most profound. Furthermore, what's remarkable about Yitzchak is that he is characterized by someone who exercised discipline. And so for a person to be able to endure in this context, you have to have a certain amount of commitment that defies the self. And again, in this commitment we find the return to uh, a greater acknowledging, or um, a greater affinity with the divine, and a less affinity with the self. This also is expressed of digging wells. You know, when you dig a well, you have to go through a lot of dirt before you can get to the water. And the more dirt you go through, the closer you're getting to the water. The remarkable thing about a well is that, we think of, if you've ever dug a well, which I haven't, but we think of a well as being, you dig a hole and all of a sudden, water comes out. But in reality, what happens is that the water and the well are really one. As you get down, the earth becomes moist. And what I see there is that the water itself the um, is part of the dirt experience. Late one night, at a Hasidic Farbrengen, I listened to one of the great Chabad philosophers, who should live and be well, who talked about the difference between the water in a cup and the water in a well. The water in the cup, entities. There's the water in the cup, and they counterbalance each other, but really they live in opposition to each other. There's no real relationship between them. You might say that they're like a team. They live together in a utilitarian experience. Whereas the water and the well, he said, the water and the well are really one, and the earth is of the water, and the water is of the earth. And so, in that sense too, we go back to the sicha relationship, where it isn't about I am a cup and you're a. We are together in an experience. We are being together for togetherness, and we in that model, we aren't in matter. What really matters only is that, and so it doesn't so much matter, if a couple is arguing, or when two people are on a, and they're discussing some topic, and the sides of the argument, and they're discussing back and forth. They may disagree. That isn't the logistics of the family sides, and they disagree. When family logistics and they disagree, that's conflict. It's painful and it's traumatic, and it's something. But when date and they're arguing, the date that's being together, and it agree. It doesn't matter whether they disagree. It's simply together and they're discussing. And so I think it has a way of saying that when we are with God, the relationship with God, this relationship of togetherness with God, my job and your job, two distinct entities, are kind of working together, and therefore conflict rather, where I'm giving myself to be in your presence. The most important thing is that I'm in your presence. At that point, in the darkness, the concealment isn't a conflict, because it means that I'm in your. That's the most important thing. And so what I would leave, hope that as we struggle and exist in dark, and as we question what is happening to us and what's happening to our society, and and how we can disagree, and how we conflict, as long as we're grappling with that conflict, we are actually presence of the other, and the other in such a profound way, because that presence embraces the other unconditionally. Meaning, it's in a counterintuitive way, if you know what I mean. When we're trying to fix or come to a resolution, together, that means that our relationship is conditional. We'll only be together sense if the other one fits into the box that I. Whereas when I'm frustrated, space of frustration, and I live in that space of and of doubt and of confusion, hence that is an opportunity for me to really just experience otherness. That doesn't make sense to me, but at least to embrace the fact that I'm in the presence of another. And just remember that even if there's a beauty in the fact, and that itself, darkness into an even higher. So, wishing everyone a good week. Perhaps we'll see each other tonight. Or Secrets of the Bible, both as well as in person at the shul.